That's a great question. So the parable of the fig tree, Matthew 24:32, now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branches have already become tender, it puts forth its leaves. You know that summer is near. So you also, when you see all these things, know that it is near and at the doors. Surely I say to you, this generation will no means pass away till all these things that take place. So there's a couple of things here. I'll get to the what is a generation second, but there's two things about the fig tree we can look at, two sides of a coin. On one side, Jesus just gave us a list earlier in the chapter of signs that would be happening before the tribulation. Verses 4 through 8 of Matthew 24, the Olivet Discourse, he says in verse 8, all these are the beginning of sorrows. Then, and that kind of kicks, now we're moving into the time period of the 7 years. So there's going to be the wars and rumors of wars and all this stuff. So part of it is just paying attention to the signs, but I think also be very hard for the disciples who just the day before watched him curse a fig tree and it die, not have that image still in their head. They had just watched him curse a fig tree, and then the next day the fig tree's dead, and that fig tree represented Israel. So that event was he came to Israel looking for fruit. There was no fruit. The fig tree died, but now he's talking about the fig tree coming back again. And so I think it's also hard, other than just the general signs of his coming. This will tie into the question that got asked online. Also, we see the specifics of Israel. Now, many people over the years then have taken this as somewhat of a formula or a recipe. Well, the birth of Israel is the rebirth of the fig tree. Therefore, if we can just determine what a generation is and tack that on to the end, we'll know that the second coming should be before that time. This is how we ended up with like 88 reasons the rapture is happening in 1988. And some of the people who've been trying to pinpoint the date of the rapture and trying to figure these things out. The hard thing with this generation shall pass away. First, if you take it as a literal physical generation, if that's what we're talking about. Well, is it 40 years? Is it 80 years? Is it a lifespan? Is it the span? So there's all these different things. I actually wrote down here, a generation in the wilderness was basically 40 years or 38 years. That generation passed away within that period of time. In Genesis 15:16, it makes reference to a generation. You do the math, it comes out to 66 years. But then does it start in 1948 when they got Jerusalem? Does it start it became a nation, 1967 when they retook Jerusalem, their capital? Does it start in 2017 when America recognized Jerusalem as the capital? There's all these funny things you can look into. But here's the other hard part is that word generation, the word genos in the Greek, it can also actually just mean like genes, genetics, this race of people. And so some say, well, it's not necessarily so much talking about the time period of a generation, but the generation, the people, the gene pool of the Jews, they're not going to pass away before this happens. The idea being is another way this can be interpreted is basically just saying that these people aren't going anywhere and they're not going to pass away no matter how grim it looks. And that even still ties back in with the rebirth of Israel and stuff in the latter days. And so I will say, I don't think you can pinpoint times necessarily from this verse because there's too many variables and ways can be interpreted. And I'm one, I don't like getting specific when I don't think the Bible is clear enough for me to be, well, it's this year, it's 40 years plus this, so the date's going to be somewhere in this window. I'll say this too. I think a lot of people, as many of you have been going to this church, like, I believe in the rapture of the church. I believe in the pre-tribulational rapture of the church. I believe it because of the Bible, and I believe it because of many other reasons. But I think when people start date setting and building up hype around, well, it's been 40 years since 1948, and then it doesn't happen, I think a lot of people have left that position, and in my opinion, good theology, because of disappointment. When people start saying dates and the dates don't happen, people get discouraged and start abandoning ship. Well, you told us it was this time, then you told us this time, then you told us this time. I'm just going to go over here to this camp where they're not making those claims. And so it's tough when you try and date set.